Well, I guess we might as well get started. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Turk, for those of you who are new. I am the co-chair of the Missouri Progressive Action Group, MOPAG, and we meet every first Saturday of the month at 1:30. Presently, we're meeting via Zoom. We hope to return to in-person meetings as soon as we can find a suitable place. I'd like to start us off with a treasurer's report.
Okay, as of today, in the bank, we have $1,217.56.
Okay. How many paid memberships does that represent at the moment? Do you
I
know?
need to get you that list together.
Okay.
It's been kind of spread out, so I will get you that list.
All right. Are there any announcements?
No, but I haven't probably paid my dues in a while. How do I get a check to someone?
Steve? You want to, Diane would like to know how to send a check in, and it's to your address at the moment?
Yeah, Diane, do you want to do it by check or credit card?
I don't care.
You can do it by credit card. Just go to mopag.net. Mopag.net, you'll see a donate in the upper right-hand side.
Okay. Yeah, I should have thought of that.
And there's a place where you can send checks as well. You'll see it there.
Right. Perfect.
And Christina, if any of us have forgotten where we are in that process, please don't hesitate to let us know. I think I paid. So
We received a lot in the late last year, so I'll get that list and because it was really spread out a couple months. So.
Okay. All right, I'd like to introduce our main speaker today, the Honorable Rita Hurd Days, County Councilwoman from District 1 and Chair of the St. Louis County Council. Rita, you're on.
Well, good afternoon. It's good to see all of you and kind of become a little bit more familiar with your organization, of which I was not. And so I'm very appreciative of your asking me to be here. Nobody gave me a time frame of what I can talk about and who I can talk about and how long I can talk about it. So I'm just going to take my liberties. I don't know how long your meetings are actually. So, you know, if I'm going a little long, just kind of let me know. But I do like to entertain questions, or particularly things that are burning on your heart. What's important to you, you know, may or may not be important to me. And so I want to make sure that I cover the kinds of things that you're looking for me to cover. I was initially told that you wanted a little more information about the propositions that will be on the ballot on Tuesday. And I am absolutely prepared to do that. As you well know, we have 4 of them, A, B, C, and D. And there's a rationale for each of them. And I will try to go through that, if you will. The first one has to do with the allocation of funding for different departments in the annual budget and how that's determined. This came to us before I got on the council. There was some kind of an audit by the state auditor, Nicole Galloway, and she discovered that there are several positions in several different departments that are reporting to the county executive. However, they are not part of his budget. And so her concern was, and you know, could still continue to be, that does not give a realistic picture of what the county executive's budget was. For instance, he will have, at this particular point, maybe several people that are working in the planning department. They're being paid out of the planning department, but they're actually part of the county executive's a staff, and they report directly to the administration. So I think she called it ghost employees, if you will, because they don't perform the duties of the department they are paid from, but rather, they do, again, as I said, work with the county executive's department, and there is no budgetary oversight for those departments that are there. So that is a charter amendment. I think that's a charter amendment. Not sure about that, but anyway, that is the crux of what that particular proposition is to do. And whether you want or know it all, I'm supportive of that, because I think that as the legislative body, we begin to look at the budgets and what the departments are. Some of the departments can seem a little bloated, if you will, and it really is not to their own devices that they're doing this. So I think it gives a very clear picture. It gives a clear picture to us as to what is in that budget. And then it also, because it is thank you very much for that, because it gives you a better idea of where your monies are being spent, as well as the personnel that you have. So Proposition B has to do with the county executive and having employment outside of the role of county executive. And in the current charter, it was assumed that is exactly what the charter said. However, of late, that has become some problematic in the fact that different people are interpreting it a little differently. I don't think we have had a county executive before that had outside employment, but we do have that concern here. And so if the citizens of St. Louis County want outside employment for their county executive, this is an opportunity to make it an ironclad issue, about an ironclad decision about how that is to be done. And so as we look for different avenues and what the actual responsibilities are for the county executive, it is in some ways difficult to say if you're in the middle of a surgery and then we have some kind of major undertaking in St. Louis County, how is that handled? How do you make that decision? So early on in the charter, it was thought that position was very clear, but there has been lately some ambiguity about that. Proposition C is basically for the unincorporated areas. We have, as you know, 88 municipalities in St. Louis County. Many of them have passed this tax. This is called, what we call the Wayfair tax. And it is on purchases that are coming from other places, Amazon, all these mail order places. We had a lot of that, and probably still do during the pandemic, but it has been a challenge even before then. Even when I was in the legislature, we talked about the fact that it's unfair to the brick and mortar stores who are struggling every day to maintain a facility, and they are taxed. And of course, goods and services coming from other places and coming from warehouse and mail order places are not taxed. So we have to put this on the budget for the unincorporated areas. Many of the municipalities have already passed this tax, and many of them will have this tax on the ballot on Tuesday. So we're just trying to make sure that there is consistency with how we're dealing with that across the board. And the fourth one has to do with a foundation. It's called a Rain Tree Foundation, and they want to lease part of Queenie Park to build a private school there. And it has to go to a vote of the people simply because it is a county property, and we can't lease that without the permission of the citizens of St. Louis County. So that's basically what we have in terms of the propositions. And I can stop there and ask you if you have any questions at this point about those four initiatives that will be on the ballot on Tuesday.
Glenn?
I have a concern about letting an outside entity build buildings in a park on leased ground. And it's kind of hard to imagine a school without buildings, a football stadium, parking lots. In Queenie Park, they're not making any more parkland inside the 270 loop. There's very little parkland outside the 270 loop except in Wildwood. Losing Queenie Park or Chuck Queenie Park kind of bothers me a lot.
I can understand that. Their proposal came, and of course, again, if that's the decision of the electorate, that's where you come in. If you don't like that, you don't want that, it doesn't happen. But we do have to offer that for the citizens to make that decision. Yes, it is indeed a private entity, as I said, a Raintree. The name of this Raintree Foundation, I believe. And it is some kind of a primary school that they're going to be building there. You know, we are known for our green space here in St. Louis County. We love our green space, and we love our parks. And so, to the extent that we can and do, I'm not sure why Queenie Park was selected. Maybe it's a land. I do not know that. But again, that will be determined by the citizens of St. Louis County.
Ross? You have your hand up. Unmute.
Yes. I have a comment about the Proposition D and a question about Proposition C. The St. Louis Voters Guide in the Post-Dispatch has comments on all of these propositions, which I find helpful and valuable. On Proposition D, they comment that the Raintree Foundation would allow that the county would continue to rent the facility to other parties after school hours and thus retain that revenue. And the foundation would be responsible for capital improvements, utilities, maintenance, and the lease revenue. Another comment, the lease revenue and upkeep will save the county significant expenditures. So this sounds like a good deal to me. I will plan to vote for it. I hate to disagree with Glenn. I can't remember doing that before. Proposition C, if anybody wants to comment on Proposition D, I'll let them go ahead, and then I want to ask a question about Proposition C.
I don't see any other hands up. Oh wait,
There's
Al has
Al.
a hand up. Al?
Just real quick, yeah. Yeah, I live right down the street from there, so I'm pretty close to that. I know the Raintree people are very progressive primary school. I believe they're just renting. I don't think they're planning on building any stadium. So I'm going to vote for it too. They're good friends of mine. So.
Okay, Samuel? You have
Hello.
your hand up?
Thank you for having me today. I have a question about the. It kind of feels like a conflict of interest with. I don't know what the proposition is about this outside employment. I remember hearing about. There's been a lot of reporting about the conflict between Ms. Days and Sam Page, especially with the mask. I remember it was big about the mask because Representative Days didn't vote for the mask mandate. I'm wondering if any of this is personal. If this was brought by Councilwoman Days? And then I've been in some meetings where the vitriol between Councilwoman Days and Executive Page was brought up. I'm wondering if this is at all personal.
No, not at all. We have a charter that we're governed by. The charter is very specific. At least we thought the charter was very specific, and it indicated that that would be the only job that the county executive would have. The second thing about the mask is that when we started with the mask and the quote mandate, if you will, there's a way that you have to implement that. We had state law that required how those masks and that thing was supposed to be done. It was not done in that order, and that meant that we would be violating a state law. I don't do that. If the state law tells us we have to do 1, 2, and 3, I'm not going to do 3, 4, and 5. And so clearly, absolutely, in my perspective, it is not personal. It's about business, and it's about doing what you're required to do and following the letter of the law.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up. Ross, did you have an additional question?
Yes, I
About-
did. About Proposition C. It's going to impose a local use tax at the same rate as the total local sales tax. My question is, how does that get imposed? Is it up to us to ensure that if we make a purchase online, that the online purveyor includes that tax, or is it something that we're supposed to keep track of and report?
Well, it's my understanding that it would happen the same way the other taxes are handled from outside vendors. If you will notice, a lot of times when you purchase something online, it'll say an additional tax in different states. It will give you a different state of, Alaska, Montana. It's not included in those states. That's down in the very, very small print. Sometimes you really can't see it. But it will, in my understanding, it will not be left up to the individual. It will be part of the assessment when you check out. It will add those taxes to your bill. That is my understanding as to how this would happen. So you would not really be responsible for making sure that that is tallied. That's the way I understand it right now.
Okay, great, thank you. Hey, I wanted to ask you, Councilwoman, if you had settled positions on those propositions yourself.
So far, I have said yes to those who have asked me. I have said yes on all of those propositions.
Don.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, Councilwoman Days, you have some other topics you want to cover. Do you not in your time, or are we all going to do question and answers here?
Yes, because I know that you, Don, sent me quite a bit of information on some white papers and things like that you I don't know if you wanted me to talk about them or you just really wanted me to be informed of it as some of with the Ferguson community. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So here's my concern, and actually when County Executive Page, I don't know, maybe it was the last time he spoke to us, it was 2 years ago. I tried to get him to talk about the equity challenge, okay? And not in superficial terms, but in terms of how we do the regional planning and administration of county affairs and the departments, so that we actually implement programs and do financing that provides equity throughout the county. And I talked about with the rest of some of the other members here, the white paper series of white papers that David Russ did. And there were several recommendations. One was on regional planning, which Kansas City does a whole lot better. That's my subjective opinion. They do a whole lot better job than we do. And the other was in the county providing its AAA bond rating to help those communities in the county that don't have that rating and yet need to fund significant capital expenditures. And, a lot of those are in North County. We need to redistribute the wealth and, so that we as a region are growing in terms of the quality of life. So that was my major concern, and it's about trust in government and capacity at the local level, which we just don't talk enough about.
Well, I do agree to a certain extent that that when you look at the equity issue, it's absolutely not there. We see that in everything that happens within county government. You see that within the schools. You see that within roads and bridges. You see a lot of the inequities there. And it is my, that's my thought that equity is intentional. If you're truly interested in making sure that you have a level playing field for all parts of North, South, as well as West County, you would devote the kinds of resources that are needed to make sure that those areas are brought up to par as well. I can right now tell you that, you know, we have been dealing years and years with trying to figure out what's going on with Jamestown Mall. I mean, you can't figure out how you can tear a building down, make the ground safe. You know, we have lots of environmental issues that are in the First County Council District. I can tell you that I look at Kinloch. We've just had a major issue with Kinloch where, you know, these other folks are coming into Kinloch, dumping tires and mattresses and all kinds of debris in these areas. And who's looking out for that? And of course, and when you say too much about it, you know, you wreak the ire of some people who really don't want that to happen. But you know that half of Kinloch, if not more than half, was bought up by the airport. And these people are dumping on airport properties. They're not doing anything about that. They're dumping on St. Louis County properties, which are in Kinloch, and they're also dumping on Kinloch properties. Well, we know the resources of Kinloch are very meager. They don't have the wherewithal to handle that. And so I have been working for over a year with the folks out in Kinloch to do something about that. And right now, I think it was this is Saturday. So that must have been Thursday or Friday. We have 31 felony warrants that have been issued against this gentleman who continues to dump in Kinloch with no recourse. There's been nothing is done to this gentleman. And so, you know, this has to stop. You don't do this in your other neighborhoods, and you clearly do not need to do it here. So that's why I'm saying that the county needs to step in and do what it needs to do. If you want to be the leader, then you lead and say, this is not acceptable. I also had the partnership. We have lots of county properties in the city of Wellston where we have purchased these properties. They're part of the land reorganization, LRA. I forgot what it stands for, but LRA properties that are owned by St. Louis County. One of them was in Lulu Heights. It was a disaster. People dumped in there and just left it. So what we did was we limited access to that area. We had the economic partnership to go in and clean that up. We have barriers there. We also have cameras there, so that if somehow it you know starts to creep back up, we can at least have the license plate, so we can charge these people. They will continue to do this if there are no repercussions, there are no consequences. So when you look at what's going on in North County, it is not just now. It has been going on for a number of years. And I don't think that the county has utilized the resources that it can to better North County. I will say that I am working very, very closely with Councilwoman Webb. Her main reason for running was to do something with Jamestown Mall. And so that's what I'm going to help her with. And she's going to be also helping me with trying to handle some of the problem properties that are in the first and the fourth.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up at the moment, and I wanted to ask you, with our last census data that came out, the county has lost population. I believe they did 10 years ago as well. Now, it's not as dramatic as the city's population loss, but it still is a loss. And I was wondering if the county council had discussed that, and if there were any efforts to remediate loss of population in the county.
The short answer is no. There has been no conversation about that at all. And as a matter of fact, for county council districts, my district lost more population than anyone, I think, and I don't know the exact number, but I do know that my district lost more population than anyone else. And if you look at the migration though, and if you look at the migration coming out of the city of St. Louis, they're losing population. Some of that is coming to St. Louis County. However, as the population increases in St. Louis County from this city, we're also losing a population to St. Charles County and Jefferson and Franklin County. All these counties around us are gaining population as we are losing. And so I have not, and I don't know what the administration has done to address that, but I will say that it is becoming, and 10 years is a long time, but it takes 10 years when you look at how this is happening. In 10 years, we will continue to lose population if we don't do something to address what is happening. The thing that bothers me more than anything else is that we're losing young people. Young people in our area, they're not staying here. They're going to school. They're not coming back to St. Louis in many instances. You know, they're moving to the East Coast, the Carolinas. They're moving to the Sun Belt, Atlanta, places like that. And we have to make a concerted effort to open up and figure out what it is that we need to do to maintain, particularly the young people in this area. Seniors are not necessarily moving out or moving away. Many of them are traversing to smaller homes, looking at how they don't have to climb up and down steps. And so we need to figure out how we can even make senior housing a little more palatable for folks who want to stay in their neighborhoods. They don't want to move out, but yet sometimes in these neighborhoods like mine, the houses are a minimum of a story and a half. And so once you reach a certain age, you're not trying to climb steps for that. So I think those are a couple of things that, you know, long-term plans we need to start looking at.
Another question I had for you has to do with the first charter school will be opening in St. Louis County in Pagedale this fall, and that's going to impact the Normandy School Collaborative School District to begin with, but efforts on the part of the state legislature to have an open enrollment bill passed might cause many other school districts in the county to be impacted by that charter school. I was wondering if you had any concerns about that, because I've heard that a number of North County mayors are concerned.
We are very concerned about that. It's starting my political career was started at the Normandy School District. I served on that school board for 9 years. I will say flat out, I am not supportive of charter schools as they stand at this particular point. I think they drain many of the resources from the regular public schools that we have. We know that Normandy is one of the lowest performing school districts in not only St. Louis County, but probably in the state. I think we have had major inadequate leadership in the Normandy School District, and I am supportive of the mayors in this area that's trying to rectify the situation. I will say that from the outset, that to have a superintendent to come in from a charter school environment, number one, was a major mistake. I think that it was by design that you picked a superintendent that did not have the qualifications to be a superintendent. And I think that was by design. That had to come from Jefferson City with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Those folks would not put a uncertificated person in Rockwood or Parkway or Webster Groves. You would not have a person running your school district that did not have the credentials. So in my mind, the school in Pagedale, it is part of a larger plan to take over many of your challenged school districts. And we know that many of them are in the first council district.
Thank you for those remarks. I live in the city. And of course, the DESE did the same thing to us when they certified the unqualified William Roberti to run our district for a year. And so I'm heartened to hear you to make those remarks and for your support of Normandy. And I hope the charter school is not successful and that you're able to bolster the school district and generally rally support to it. Sam Charles, I see that your hand is up again.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Councilwoman Days. Thank you for supporting this effort. I'm the political director with AFP 420 here in the city. And we have been fighting the bills that are trying to stop this. And so what is happening with Normandy, I believe, if I can expand on that a little bit, is that there's groups that are funded by corporations, and the one that's they've done it in the city. It's called Opportunity Trust.
Correct.
If you've heard about this,
Oh, absolutely.
It's like Rex Singfeld and this collaborative this group of like white Republicans who think that they want to siphon off the money from if I'm just going to say Black and brown children, and this is where they want to go and take the funding from it.
Maxine Clark. Maxine Clark also, Sam.
Yes. And there was some articles in the paper, if you've heard about the Kairos Academy, about how mismanaged it is. I can put the links in the chat about what they did was they made the shell company so they didn't have to hire and pay into the St. Louis Public Schools retirement system.
Mhm.
And they could, I don't know if did you guys see this in the Post-Dispatch? It was a couple weeks. I'll put this on the chat for you all. It's crazy the corruption that they're willing to do to, and I hope that you guys are able to stop that in Normandy.
Well, I do appreciate that. And I remember when this gentleman was hired and I got a call from a state representative and said, you all just hired the champion of Opportunity Trust there. And so again, the St. Louis County Council is not responsible for the education, but they knew that I had been very vocal in my years in the legislature fighting against charter schools. And so they called and said, well, what is it that you all have done? And so I did not know this gentleman, but she was able to say, yes, he has been in my office. He has been talking about charter schools, and now the Normandy School District is going to hire him. Well, one of the board members, if you will know, that was on the what is it called? Joint Board of whatever. Anyway, that person came from Commerce Bank. Commerce Bank is very involved in the charter school movement, as well as the church, Friendly Temple Church. They are very involved in the charter school movement. And if you start to peel back the onion, you will find out that at the core of this are a lot of your elected officials, all right? And a lot of your corporations, and that's is the basis for all of this charter school movement. So I will tell you, I'm going to hang with the mayors, and if whatever they need me to do for that. But again, St. Louis County does not have a specific role in the education component in St. Louis County.
You know who's not? You're a legislator. What's his name? Your representative from Normandy.
Kevin Wyndham is a
Kevin
representative.
Wyndham. Yes, and he is great. I watched him. He destroyed the guy who was trying to get 1552. He like walked him out and just destroyed him. It was great watching him and Jeff City do that. He is good.
And we have to have more proponents there. We can't afford to sit down, and let this happen because they feel that we're not engaged in this process. And that's how they come through. And this is what we have. So all they need is a toehold into this process, and it's over for the public schools as I see them.
Luckily in the Senate, if I don't mean to be taking all your time up, ma'am. Luckily in the Senate, we have all the senators from the St. Louis area have kind of bound together and are able to block this with a filibuster. They did that on Tuesday night, I think. Beck and Senator May stopped it because they were able to hold it together.
Jill Shoup
stop talking now.
Jill Shoup.
Yeah,
Senator Shoup is an advocate. That is correct.
Yeah, they're talking about HB 1552. That's the bill I told you about that would take an inequitable amount of money from the public schools to the charter schools. This will impact that charter school and the Normandy School District as well.
It's $18 million from SLPS alone.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
If I could,
Don, you have your hand up?
Yeah, if I could say, and I think this reflects, it's one issue of many, okay, that gets back to Susan's question about growth, and growth for growth's sake is another issue. But the fact of the matter is we are losing our young people, and it's because we as a region are not effectively dealing with these. If we don't have a good public education system, that's a pillar we cannot afford to have collapse. And so we have to have better collective impact and collaboration, and misguidance of these people who have all this money pushing all these let's say unequitable plans for the community. We have to fight back against that, and it means we have to be strategic in our collaboration and our planning as a region.
I very quickly want to remark before I call on Diane and Steve, whose hands are raised, that the League of Women Voters is engaged in a project to advocate for equitable school funding for districts in throughout the state that are predominantly educating disadvantaged children. And we are actively seeking community partners to help us put pressure on the State Board of Education and the legislature eventually to better fund these school districts, because it doesn't matter if it's charter schools or public schools, if they're not adequately funded. When you have a high concentration of students living in poverty, they're not going to succeed. And Local 420 is one of our community partners trying to help us influence the State Board of Education to put pressure on the legislature to do that. So let's see, Diane, you have your hand up.
Well, I was just wondering, Samuel mentioned Commerce Bank, which, I didn't know anything about this. So is there a list of corporations behind this and people?
Well, I mentioned the fact that one of the board members on the Normandy Collaborative was from the Commerce Bank administration, if you will, and Commerce Bank is really involved in the charter school movement.
Diane, basically, all of Civic Progress, which became Greater St. Louis, and the Regional Commerce and Growth Association, which became Greater St. Louis, the business community, locally and nationally, corporations have been behind pushing charter schools, and they are doing it because they see charter schools as a less expensive way to educate our children. Charter schools are they fight unionization of their staffs. So very few, maybe nationally 1 or 2 charter schools might have a union, but they generally don't have unionized staff. And so their teachers are not paid as well, and they have higher turnover, and they're also not required all to be certificated to teach. 20% of them in the state of Missouri are allowed not to be certificated. So your basic corporate, right-wing corporations throughout the country, Target, Netflix, Microsoft, Koch brothers, just, I could go on and on. If it's a large corporation in this country, for the most part, it's supporting the privatization of public schools.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And it is a problem. Steve, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Rita about the challenges that the metropolitan region faces generally in terms of growth. And this region is not the only one that has faced such issues. And I'm wondering, I'm ignorant of, maybe you can inform me. Has the council or maybe other bodies reached out to those cities that have perhaps more successfully met these challenges within their regions? I'm thinking of Indianapolis or others that might in some way help inform our efforts to make St. Louis region what we want it to be?
Well, as a body, we have not. Several of our mayors have visited places like Indianapolis, and they have visited Nashville, and they have brought back suggestions and things as to how we can do that. I think the big part about particularly St. Louis County is the fractions that are involved. As I said, we have 88 municipalities, and each of them, have their own playbook. They have, their own way that they want to do things. And if you have those many folks that are, pulling not necessarily pulling together, it creates a major problem in my mind. We talked about, the city and the county merging together, if you will, or however that's going to come about. But in my mind, St. Louis County has to get its own act together first before we do anything else with that. And having all of these, and I will say this goes back to my days in the House. And if I ever came back and if I ever said anything about, we need to do away with all these municipalities and bring them all together, they'd run me out of town on a rail. And I am very, very aware of that, because everybody has their own seat of government. They all want to be a mayor. They all want to be on a town council, and this gives them some sense of importance, I guess, if you will. But if you look at the picture as a whole, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. We have one in the Normandy area. We have an organization called 24-1, 24 municipalities under one umbrella to look at economies of scale, figuring out how we work together in figuring out the challenges that we have. And I think more of us need to come together on even a smaller scale like that. This 24-1 is around the Normandy School District. And so that's how that came together. But I think that if we made more of an effort to collaborate on different things, it would make us a lot better. And I would really suggest we do that before we're looking at joining with anything or anybody. We got to get our own house in order. And once we do that, once we have all the municipalities or all the folks, or how we're going to do it on a level playing field where you don't have the highs and lows in one community and not another, I think that will go a very, very long way in us establishing communities such as Indianapolis and Nashville and Memphis and places like that. And I'm sure they have their challenges as well, but at least from the outside, it looks real good. And so I think that would help us a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Rita.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Rita? Because I see that our next speaker has joined us, and I don't want to overextend Rita if she has other things to do on this lovely afternoon.
Well, Susan, thank you, and thank all of you for having me. The last thing I do want to say about the charter schools, and boy, you got me started on that one, but you have to look at the number of failures of the charter school. Let's just not look at what they bring and look at the numbers that have gone under because of mismanagement, because of whatever the reason, they have not been successful. And so how many times do we have to deal with this experiment? And I look at it as an experiment. You do it over and over and over. You're doing the same thing over and over, and you expect a different result. And I think that when we're doing that, let's look at those who have not been successful. And I think that would put us in a good place of seeing whether we need to move forward with this or not. So thank you, Susan. Thank all of you. And if that's the last question, I'm pleased to turn it over to your next speaker.
Thank you very much, Rita. I wanted to interject that Marcus Robinson, the person we were talking about who was hired to run the Normandy School District, who has a charter school background, is only certified to be a substitute teacher. And the fact that a state-appointed board hired him to be the superintendent of the Normandy School District is all you need to know about the intention of these people who are allegedly trying to improve our public schools. You can't
Correct.
tell me that people who would be willing to hire someone who's only certified to be a substitute teacher, to be a superintendent, has the best interests of the children in heart and is doing a better job running a school district than an elected school board would do. They are unaccountable, and this is what happened to the city too with our state, our elected Board of Education chose a superintendent, someone who had never been a superintendent before. And so when you get these state appointed boards to take over a school district, local control and local accountability is lost and quality of leadership is lost. And we're told that this is a better way to run our schools. It is not. So I just wanted to thank Rita. I mean, I speak from experience living in the city and seeing what they did to us. They did the same thing to Riverview and it didn't improve things there. And, Normandy fortunately is transitioning back to an elected school board and hopefully a brighter future.
What is the definition of insanity? We got it.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for giving us some of your time, Rita. I know it's
Take
valuable.
care. Take care and thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Our next speaker and you're welcome to remain here if you'd like, but I'm sure you're busy. Our next speaker this afternoon is Ben Samuels. Ben is a candidate in the August primary for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District, where I know many of our members live. So Ben, welcome to MOPAG and talk to us about your campaign for Congress.
No, thank you all for having me, and thank you everyone for making time on a Saturday in what has been a pretty nice day, although it sounds like it might be raining now, but really appreciate everyone making the time here. Well, I'll start off by saying, and I'll touch on this theme a little bit more, but it's a thing I feel a lot when I'm out and about talking to people in the community. And since a bunch of people have their video on, raise your hand if over the last couple of years, your relationship with a family member, a neighbor, a loved one, a friend, whatever, has been made harder by the political situation in the country. And that's part of that's a big part of the issue that we're trying to confront here, which is there is more extremism and there is a deeper divide than there has ever been in American politics in what feels like generations. And we have to fight back against that because government really isn't working the way that it should be working. And at the same time, I bring that up to say bipartisanship and the ability to get stuff done isn't totally dead. It's just mostly dead in this district. In the 2 examples I'll give with how Ann Wagner has voted, she voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is going to bring all sorts of investment, money, much needed jobs and infrastructure to the region. And then just earlier this week, there was a bill that passed the House to make sure that insulin stays affordable for individuals who are suffering from diabetes, and she voted against that too. And that's another bipartisan bill. It's what people, I think, want, and it's just totally missing. And I'm running to bring a sense of goodness and decency and an attitude that we have to try to get things done through public service, because it feels like that's just not here right now. So my background, and I'll touch a little bit on my experience also, and then what some of our campaign priorities are, and turn it over to all of you for questions at the end. But I started my career without ever really thinking that I would move into public service. I worked at a software company for a while, and then they got bought by MasterCard, and so worked at MasterCard for a period of time. But I suspect, like a lot of you, Trump's election pretty profoundly changed my worldview in the sense that it really, and before I was really under the belief that things were getting better, and maybe it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and things weren't where they needed to be, but things were getting better. And Trump's election, again, like a lot of you, I think it pretty profoundly changed my worldview, where it felt like things were getting more divisive, more hateful, there was less getting done, there was more demonization of the other in politics, and I couldn't stand by and do nothing with all of that happening. So I left my job in the private sector and went to go work in the public sector. And my focus since then has been around the sorts of nonpartisan issues that matter to most of people on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of my work has been economic development and job growth, infrastructure, good governance, and also climate change. And one of the things I'm proudest of, and can talk about this more if people are curious, but I led a group of states. There were 13 states that were aligning on a transportation policy to reduce emissions from the transportation sector. And we're seeing how important that is right now, not just because of the effects of climate change, but with gas prices being what they are right now, how do we address climate change in a way that also makes transportation more affordable and gives people more choice in how and whether they commute and their ability to work from home, public transit options, and broader transportation affordability. And the interesting thing about that process is you can see a couple of things. I think too often Republicans paint a lot of issues as black and white. And there are ways, which I've worked on and have seen, to address climate change and to create jobs while you're doing it, to address one of the really pressing issues we face as a society and as a planet today, but doing it in a way that has strong bipartisan support. And those are the ways that you find good, lasting solutions to a lot of the really challenging issues we face as a country today. And part of what was so interesting about that is, I had the opportunity to work with Republicans and with Democrats, with independents, and with people, in the progressive world, and people in the labor world, advocacy, business world. And broadly speaking, people want a lot of the same things. It just feels like we're really far apart on issues, but people want cleaner air. People want more affordable transportation. Most people want to address climate change and recognize that it's an important issue. And that's true of Democrats across the board. But even if you look at most Republicans under the age of 50 or under the age of 40, they'll put climate change as one of their 2 or 3 most pressing issues that the government has to try to address. And so there really is an opportunity to do something on a bipartisan basis. And I'm proud of the fact that I've had that opportunity and have really gotten to see, I think, the best and the worst in what's out there. The worst being the divisiveness that I've talked a lot about, but the best being that you still find people who are in public service for the right reasons, who want to help others, who want to get things done, who want to create opportunity and equity for people in their communities. And that's what I aspire to be in a public servant, is trying to help out people who need it the most and trying to invest in a region that I think right now, Ann Wagner isn't really doing much to invest there. So that's a bit about my background. And even after having moved into the public sector, I never thought I'd really ever run for office. And it's just everything that we've been seeing over the past year that really changed my perspective on things. And so there's a lot of people who talk about January 6th having been their motivation for running for office. And it was to some degree for me, but much more than that, it was everything that happened in the weeks following. I remember watching all of that stuff a little bit more than a year ago on TV and thinking, as horrifying and horrible as it was, this is as bad as it's going to be, because we've seen how terrible this is. We've seen the dangers of extremism in politics, and we're going to move away from that. And we're going to go back to normal, and normal is not good enough and has all sorts of issues, and there's more work to do. But we're going to move away from all of this divisiveness. And what we're seeing instead is the total opposite of that, where somehow for elected Republicans today, denying election results and taking people's right to vote away has become table stakes. And that's really horrifying. And so I am, when you start waking up every day thinking that democracy might not survive another election or two, it's frightening and it's motivating. And I wanted to try to do something about it, because I think there's a lot of work we need to do as a region to not only do good and invest here, and I'll touch on that in a second, but to get someone out of office who, in a sense, she's not a true believer in all of this. She's someone who plays along because it's the politically expedient thing to do, and we've got to do more to bring opportunities and jobs into the region. And so that, that's our lead message of the campaign. I think what we talk a lot about, and given the composition of the second district, which is sort of through and through a pretty purple district, but a district where to win, we're going to need to win 2 or 3% of people who voted for Trump or who stayed at home because they didn't like either candidate in the last election. And I think the way that we do that is talking about the things that matter most to people in the community here. And obviously, we do need to make sure that we're addressing climate change, and we do need to make sure that we're talking about the fact that democracy really is in a fragile spot. But I think we need to do it in a way that helps us really build a big tent. And so a lot of the time with climate change, people recognize the threat that represents, but also talking about how investing in renewable energies is a great way to achieve energy independence, which has become such a big issue in the context of everything happening in Russia and in Ukraine today. Talking about transportation affordability, talking about cleaner air. I think with democracy, it's a little bit of the same thing, where across the board, Democrats and Republicans agree that government's not working. And this is certainly one of the symptoms of the fact that government's not working. But take the Medicaid expansion vote. I mean, this is a vote where, despite the tilt of the state, it passed, and the state legislature is still refusing to act on any of the Medicaid expansion stuff and not listening to the voters. People recognize that that government just isn't working for them right now. But the things I hear about the most, and the things I talk about the most, are the fact that people are leaving, jobs are leaving, people who grew up here are leaving and not coming back. And we need younger people and people my age to come back to the region and invest in the region and make homes in the region. But right now, it's hard. I think a lot of people here don't feel like there's the opportunity to come back here. And I talked to a lot of people. Actually, I'll do another poll of the room here. Raise your hand. I'm looking around my screen. Raise your hand if you have at least one adult child or grandchild. And so keep your hand up if at least one of them does not live in St. Louis. So most people, a few hands going down, and I think you guys are the lucky ones, but most people have to go to Chicago to visit their kids, or their grandkids come in from Dallas a couple times a year, from Denver, or Nashville, or wherever. And we've got to be doing more as a region to bring jobs, people, opportunity back here, because that's just not something that's been happening. And I think part of that, and I think people really feel and talk to me a lot about, is public safety. How do you invest in making sure that this is a safe community for everyone, because everyone has a right to feel safe in their community. And we know that too many people here don't feel that way. And so making sure that we are investing in things to make the community safer. Policing is certainly a big part of that, but also job access and education, transportation access, and housing. Those are all part of the recipe too. It's not just policing, although that's certainly a big part of it. But, I think we win this race by talking about the stuff that matters most to people out in the community. And what I'm hearing a lot of is government that doesn't work, and fear for the future, and people who feel like there's more division than ever, and there isn't enough being done by their current representatives at the state and at the federal level to invest in the community. And so excited to bring that energy and hopefully a new generation of leadership to a role that I think really needs it, because I don't know if we're being, and I know we're not being well served right now. I'll say the last thing, in spite of some of the negative stuff that I've said, too many people I know my age, but I think across the board, feel like we've spent our entire life voting against someone, where I don't love this person, but the other person is horrific or odious, and I don't want to have to vote for that person, so I'll vote for this other person. And I would like to be, and hoping that we're running a campaign where we're someone that people are excited to vote for, and not just voting against the other person. And I think we need more optimism in politics and hope that in spite of everything that we're seeing that's so challenging and so hard right now, that there are ways to make things better, that this is still worth it. It is still worth it to volunteer. It is still worth it to vote. It is still worth it to phone bank. And I think too many people have lost some of that hope. And it's why I'm really grateful to see so many of you on the phone here today, because we need all of you out there working on this campaign. We need volunteers. We need people in the community who are excited to get out there and win this race, not just to get someone we don't like out of office, as important as that can be, but because we can actually try to do some good here and bring some positive change to a role and to a region and to a state that we all really know really needs it. And so I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you, and more than that, really grateful to have the opportunity to run here and to meet so many different people from so many walks of society who don't always see eye to eye on everything, but who all want the same things. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. People want safer communities. People want better schools. People want more jobs, better jobs. And that's what we're excited to bring to the table. So I'll stop there and would love to answer questions that any of you have. But again, really, really grateful to get to know all of you here.
Okay. Don, Christina, and Ross, I see your hands up. And before I call on you, I just wanted to warn Ben of one thing. I don't know how familiar you are with MOPAG, Ben, but you're talking to a group of which several of our members have been in the position you are in, have run for Congress in the 2nd District previously. So this is a particularly well-informed group about A, the issues, and D, the difficulties of running a campaign in the 2nd District. And some of our questions to you may reflect that. I have a question that I want to ask before I call on Don, Christina, and Ross, and that is the campaign speech that you just gave will be really good post-primary, but between now and August 2nd, you're running against Trish Gunby, not the Republicans, and I would like to know why we should vote for you rather than Trish, who is also a progressive Democrat.
So I think that what I like about our messaging for this campaign and the way that we're talking about things is the things that we're talking about aren't different in the primary than they are in the general. Democrats and Republicans both feel the effect of the fact that crime is a thing that really worries people and keeps businesses from moving here. People's kids are moving away and jobs are moving away and opportunities are moving away. People feel like healthcare isn't affordable. People know that the price of gas isn't affordable. People really across the board share a lot more than they think, and I think than the media likes to acknowledge. And so our message in the primary is the same as our message in the general. And I'm really proud of my background of having worked on a bipartisan basis, of having tackled a lot of the really important issues that people care most about, of having worked on issues that help government run more efficiently and work better on behalf of their constituents, of having worked on climate change issues, which I talked a lot about, and having worked on economic development, and in particular, how we recover from the pandemic. And so, I think in this district in particular, but really everywhere, but I'd say especially in this district, I think Democrats and Republicans share much more than they might otherwise acknowledge. And talking about those sorts of issues, issues of affordability, I think everything that's happening in Russia is going to come up. Those are really salient things to the community. And so running on a nonpartisan message of let's get things done is not just who I am, although it is, it's how you win in a district like this one. And so excited to bring that to bear in both the primary and the general.
Okay. Yeah, I see there are 4 hands up. I would just like to reiterate to you that if you can't distinguish between yourself and Trish Gunby, that is a weakness. And sometime between now and August 7th, if you August 2nd, if you can't articulate to voters why they should prefer you over Trish, you may not come up winning this campaign.
Well,
That's just my personal criticism, and I think about that, and I'd like to call on Don Logue.
well, I know if I can just say one thing on that, I do think, I'm really proud, as I said, I'm proud of the fact that I've worked on a bipartisan basis, and our message is a strong message of bipartisanship. And the fact that we can still get things done on a bipartisan basis, and we've still seen some of that at the federal level, just not from our representation here. And our messaging is going to be around building a big tent, around bipartisanship, around addressing a lot of the issues that are most salient to the district here. And like I said, I'm really excited to bring that to bear.
Don, I think you had your hand up first.
Yes, thank you. So Ben, I appreciate the fact you cut your teeth in politics in Chicago. Okay, working in the mayor's office had to be an extraordinary experience. I learned my politics in Illinois too, and so 54 years ago, Adlai Stevenson III, son of the governor, said to me as a small group of students, "We need more good people in local government." 10 years later, I had that opportunity myself in Springfield, Illinois. Why is it that you are bypassing that initial platform in your aspirations? And I appreciate your analysis, and I think you're spot on so many things. But let me say this: if we don't solve the trust problem and the bipartisan problem dealing with the issues at the local level, we have no chance at the federal level.
Yeah, no, and I'm really excited about the fact that I've had the chance to work with so many local elected officials, obviously people locally, people running for office locally. And I think all of that is really important, and we'll continue working very closely with people running for local office. I'll say that part of the reason I'm running for the US Congress seat is, and I'm happy to continue this conversation later with you also, is if you look at Congress today, if you look at the US workforce today as a comparison to Congress, the US workforce is about 55% millennial, so people my age. US Congress is about 7% millennials. And with my message of job growth and economic development, that's a huge mismatch between the people who are actually working the jobs, the 55% of the US workforce who are millennials, and people who are making policy, who are determining the sorts of investments that we need to be making in the future of our workforce and the future of our region. And I think it's really important that people our age have a seat at the policymaking table. And that is a big part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I think right now we're not doing enough to invest in the future of the workforce, and we're not doing enough to invest in the future of this region. And I think my background positions me pretty well there.
Don, do you have any other questions? Can we move on to Christina?
Don,
I just say I'd love to follow up, but I want to hear everybody else's thoughts.
Yes, no, I mean, I'll put my contact info in the chat right now.
Great.
Christina?
Okay, I listen to the radio station, the Big 550. It's an AM radio station. And
Yep.
After the last election, McGraw, who does the morning, between 6 and 10, he made a comment that he tried to get, they reached out to Ann Wagner and Jill Shute to come on the radio and answer some questions, and neither one of them showed up. And if you are at the opportunity, would you request and do radio shows like that? Because I don't know if it was Jill Shute's handlers. I thought this was a very lost opportunity for Jill Shute to get her message out during the pandemic.
I completely agree. I agree. We got to get out more. I have actually been on 550 twice in the last 2 or 3 months, and will continue going there because I think it's an important way to reach people. But this is you know, it sounds like a bunch of people here have run for office, if not for this seat, then certainly in this district. And we win here by reaching out to everyone, and in particular, reaching out to the sorts of voters that Democrats ordinarily aren't talking to. So I know that our maps aren't finalized yet, but I was in Iron County yesterday, and there aren't a lot of Democrats who go to Iron County. And we need to do more to get out to parts of the district and parts of the region that Democrats haven't been in the last 20 years, with maybe the exception of Claire McCaskill. But we need to do more to get out to Wildwood and Eureka and St. Charles, these places that historically have voted very Republican. And I'm not going to win in these places, but I think if we get our message out there and we talk to more people, we can close the gap a little bit. And we win this election by closing the gap. And part of that, you're exactly right, is going out and being a presence on radio and making your voice heard, literally in that case, and doing everything we can. But I don't think it stops there. I mean, I think we need to be out on conservative talk radio. We need to be talking to people who aren't normally engaged in politics, you know, going on sports talk shows and going on, you know, shows that talk about the good restaurants in St. Louis or whatever. And we have to be everywhere. So I completely agree with your perspective and have been trying to do more of that, and we'll definitely continue doing more and more of that as well.
Okay. Wait, that's just a little bit longer. Ross, you're up.
Thank you, Susan. Pardon me. Just get rid of that. Gas prices have gone up recently, and that seems to be a highly salient issue for voters. Joe Biden has released oil from the National Petroleum Reserve and encouraged drilling on federal lands more than Trump. So he has given lip service to addressing climate change, but not to actual policy in some ways. I think there is a problem here that addressing climate change is easy to give lip service to, but to actually do something about is much tougher. Mm-hmm. And requires doing things that may be unpopular. So my question is, can you do things like that that are unpopular? Let me throw in, I think there is a resolution to be found in approaches like the BTU tax, the proposal of Clinton and Gore in 1994, which was revenue neutral, would have raised taxes on all fossil fuels, but would have returned an equivalent amount to all taxpayer households, so that actually most people would have come out ahead. Okay, Ben, thanks.
No, thanks for the question. I would say these days, and hopefully it changes, gas prices probably, you know, the price of gas is the thing I hear about more than anything else. You know, at the height of the pandemic, gas was probably $2 cheaper than it is right now. And people really feel the effect that gas is as expensive as it is. At the same time, if you look at where carbon emissions come from, transportation is the largest share of transportation emissions in the United States. And it's one of the only areas that's growing. You know, power plants are becoming cleaner nationally. A lot of the other traditional sources of fossil fuel consumption are going down, but that's not the case with transportation. You know, I think first and foremost, we do need to recognize that transportation is not affordable for people right now. And we do need to think about some of the short-term fixes to make sure that transportation is affordable. And that doesn't absolve us of making sure that we're addressing the long-term stuff, which I'll touch on in a second. But I do agree with some of what President Biden has done here, because I do think we need to make transportation more affordable. But we've certainly seen how important energy independence is in all of this. And we've seen also that having gas prices, but even more than that, your cost of transportation be a function of be a function of what's happening abroad, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Russia. It's just a system that doesn't make sense. And so a lot of the climate work that I've done is a question of how do you make it easier and more affordable for people to move into lower emitting or zero emission sorts of vehicles? And there's a bunch of different ways that you do that. I think one is, if you look at transportation emissions, you do more to reduce emissions by getting someone who drives a car that gets 10 miles to the gallon into a car that gets 25 mpg than getting someone who drives a 25 mpg car into an electric vehicle. And we do need to do more to make sure that people who are hit hardest, who are often rural families, lower income families, have the opportunity to save money on their transportation bills by helping them if they choose to move into lower emitting vehicles. I'd say the other element of it is making it easier for people to have more choices in terms of when and how they commute. So we've seen obviously the rise of telecommuting, but even in parts of this district, certainly when you get out into rural Missouri, there is not enough broadband internet access. That makes it very hard for jobs to get there, and that makes it very hard for people to work remote sorts of jobs when they're there. And so making sure that we're investing not just in lower emitting vehicles and making sure that it's affordable for people as we move to lower emitting vehicles, but also these sorts of other investments that in ways you don't always expect, like broadband internet access, we're making those investments to make sure that people can drive less if they choose to drive less and emit less as a function of that. But you know, it's none of this stuff is easy or solvable overnight. And I think the key to all of this is making sure that our message is a lot around affordability. So making sure that people recognize that these days, solar and wind are cheaper than traditional coal-fired plants, and people's utility bills are going to go down as we move towards greener energy. I mean, I think that's a critical part of the messaging that we need to get out there, and we have not done a particularly good job of. And I also think that if we think about the things that are making making the transition more challenging, let's invest in those too. Let's invest in making batteries cheaper so that electric vehicles are cheaper, so that people who choose to drive EVs have the opportunity to do so. There's just been a lot about transportation just because that's where my background is, but there's things like that across the board, and the messaging needs to be the reducing carbon emissions goes hand in hand with saving money on your monthly utility bill, saving money on your gas bill, and more. And as technology gets better, that's really become pretty true, and will only become truer.
Okay, well, thanks. Hey, one piece of news: the Parsons budget actually called for $250 million for expanding broadband in Missouri. And the House Budget Chair in the state of Missouri has reduced that figure from 250 million to 100 million. And he's made a number of other, the House Budget Committee has made a number of other cuts to the federal funding monies that were coming available in the way that Missouri looks like they're going to spend it. Thank you.
I mean, there's not all that many. I mean, they're out there, but more and more, every job, every plant, every business, everyone working from home requires broadband internet access. You can't do it without it. And that to me is a cut and dry investment in the whole state. And so to cut that is just, you're just cutting economic development.
It's a crazy policy. All right, thanks for your time.
Okay. Sam Charles, you're next up.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Ben, thank you for coming. So when I was listening to you, what I was thinking, the only thing that I kept thinking was, I'm probably agreeing with everything that you were saying, but what are you saying to the people like who don't? And so like, this is what I wrote down. Like, are you willing to be Machiavelli enough to manipulate them into voting for you, right? So what you kept saying was climate change. Like that word came out of your mouth a lot. And sorry if I'm being blunt about this, but like I have a lot of family in the middle of Missouri and like in places like Iron County. They simply don't believe it. So how do you talk to them, right? So when I'm with my friends who are like out in like Wildwood area, they have like, we have two separate sets of clothes. Like we joke about like having like the Republican clothes because like that's, you know, like just to fit in. How do you do that for them when you're talking to those groups?
So I'll start off by saying, no, I'm not going to be Machiavellian. Let's just get that out there on the record. I'll answer that question, I think, in two ways. One is, you're right that there are a lot of people out there who don't think that climate change is real or that humans are driving climate change. And although we're not going to change their minds overnight, I think it's really important to be having conversations with them. I think part of the reason we found ourselves in the position we're in today is that Democrats and Republicans socialize together less, live together less, know each other less, work together less. And people just live in their own fact universes. And obviously people consuming their own media is part of the problem there, and social media is part of the problem there. But I think it's really important to be talking to people who don't see the world the same way you do, who, you know, come to these, you know, don't believe in climate change, because I think they're people you're representing too. They're Missourians too. And we've got to start talking to them, even if we're not going to get their vote in this cycle. We need to try to be more empathetic. You know, I have a friend who grew up here who doesn't live here anymore, but was back in town recently because this was about a month and a half ago. His dad died of COVID, and his dad was unvaccinated, and it was a smart guy, but unvaccinated just because he ended up down that rabbit hole. And we do need to do more to talk to people who are consuming different media than us and who don't think like us, because they're all part of our same community. So that's sort of the longer term strategy, and also just sort of the morally right thing to do and the empathetic thing to do. I'd say more broadly than that, though, you know, one of the more alarming statistics that has come out of the last year is that right now, 70% of Republicans think that the last election was fraudulent or stolen from Trump. And to get to the first point, I mean, we do need to talk to people to make sure that people have faith in the system, or the system doesn't work. But it also means that there's 30% of people who are turned off by, 30% of Republicans who are turned off by the anti-democracy rhetoric, who are disgusted by a lot of what they're seeing nationally, who are still Republicans because of different policy positions they hold, or they're turned off by things they're hearing about in terms of defund the police or socialism or whatever else. And my being a guy with a bipartisan background who's focused on more nonpartisan issues, we close that gap by talking about the things that we do share, which is a desire to have safer communities, to invest in jobs, to make people's healthcare, transportation, lives more affordable. And, you know, you're not going to win all 30% of those people, but in a district like this one, you can chip away and win some of them. And we win this district by getting Democrats excited and independents excited, and winning over certain Republicans who maybe haven't voted for Democrats ever in the past, if not recently, but are just really turned off by what they're seeing. And I don't think we've done enough as a party nationally or here to reach out to a lot of those people. And that's exactly what we need to do. And what I'm trying to do by going out to West County, going to Iron County and visiting, talking to different people, different places, going on different radio stations, that sort of thing.
Okay. Sam, is your question answered?
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to move on to Steve Reed, who's the next person in line.
Along those lines, Ben, it seems to me that your work for the Republican governor in Massachusetts is worth something talking up, at least to some of the voters.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Which you did not really do here today, and that's fine. But your schedule for canvassing. So Trish Gunby is sending me the schedule. I plan to go out and canvass for her. I'm an equal opportunity canvasser for Democrats, and I was wondering if you had put a schedule together for canvassing. Also, she's got people going out to the polls, holding signs and greeting people. on Tuesday.
Yep, and we've got the same thing going, and we can shoot you some info after this, but
Okay, great.
we're out there
Yeah.
canvassing, talking to people.
And the other thing is, I just recommend studying Ann Wagner and what she does and do it better. She has cultivated various business groups, firefighters, police organizations. So that's part of the ticket, part of the secret, I think. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, I mean, she, and a thing I've started saying a lot is people I know who are Democrats or some Republicans too, who I know, will say, you know, we don't always like her, but she's not as bad as Josh Hawley or something. And if you look at her voting record, it's more or less identical to Josh Hawley. So it's hard to say that she's not as bad as Josh Hawley. And I think we need to do more to help people recognize that she's no moderate. And she's an extremist on a bunch of different issues. And she pretends that she's not, but she is. And we've got to do more to get that out there in the public.
Okay, agreed. Thank you.
Next, I think the next hand up is Marty Walsh's.
Yeah, just a simple little thing. One of your prime issues is the environment. And I've always thought, you know, I saw a picture of people in China wearing the masks that we've all been wearing during the pandemic, but they were wearing it before the pandemic. Reason being the air in China was so bad, you know, and just showing pictures, hey, this is how bad it gets. They are cleaning it up. They're no longer wearing those masks. But we're trending more toward the need to wear masks. So just carrying the picture around to show people would seem to me, you know, show and tell.
Well, I mean, in St. Louis has some of the highest juvenile asthma rates in the United States. And part of that is air pollution, particularly for lower income families or kids of color, people who live near highways or major intersections. It's a real issue. And take carbon emissions out of it. Air pollution is a thing that affects families because of asthma and healthcare costs and a whole bunch of other things. And people, Democrats, Republicans, you know, things like asthma don't discriminate on political lines. And
the little show and tell is what I thought might be, you know, showing pictures of this is what happens if you're not careful.
Yeah, makes sense. So I've got time, I think, for one or two more questions before I have to jump.
Okay. I'm going to wrap things up. I have two brief questions for you. You've talked about crime and safety, but you haven't said how you would improve issues of safety in the 2nd District. Are you a proponent of gun control?
You know, I have said this, and I say this to Democrats and Republicans alike. I support responsible gun ownership. And that means making sure that violent criminals who have a history of domestic abuse or violent crime can't get their hands on assault rifles. But I also think that families have a right, and individuals have a right to own a gun for self-defense. Families, individuals have a right to own a gun if they like hunting. Those are all part of it. I, of course, think that everyone should do more to make sure that we keep guns out of the hands of young children and that people are practicing good in-house safety in terms of keeping their guns locked up and everything else. But we've got to do more to keep guns out of the hands of violent criminals and domestic abusers.
Okay. And my other short question is a yes or no. Do you, you know, if you make it to Congress, will you vote for or against legislation to expand school choice in charter schools?
You know, a lot of that stuff, a lot of that stuff comes down to the local level and not at the federal level. And I'd have to see what specifics are in the bill.
There is currently federal legislation having to do with startup money for charter schools. Is that something you would vote for or against, federal money for charter schools?
I'd have to look into the specifics of the bill, is the honest answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one more. I've got one time for one more. Yeah, Deanna.
So what is your stance on abortion rights?
I think it's a decision between a woman and her doctor, and the government has no role whatsoever in making that decision for individuals. So, I think we've got to do more to invest in reproductive health, and that is a part of it. And the stuff that we're seeing in Missouri right now, where you've got Republican state legislators that are trying to outlaw abortion when the mother's life is in danger, are immoral and an affront to good healthcare, and something that I strongly oppose.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for making the time here. And my email was in the chat, so certainly feel free to reach out. I will also put my website in the chat right now. But I'm excited to hopefully meet a lot of you in person sometime soon.
Good luck in your campaign. Thank you for speaking with us this afternoon, for spending some time with us.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, you're welcome to hang out, but I see you've already left. Next on our agenda is a legislative update from Glenn Koenen, and it's about 4 minutes after, it's 3:05. We're going to have Glenn, just to let you know, Ross and I are going to speak briefly about the propositions in the county, although Rita already did that a little bit. I don't know if Ross is going to have much more to say as a wrap up, but let's get on to the legislative update from Glenn.
Susan,
Yeah.
I probably don't need to add anything to the discussion we already had. Unless somebody has a question, I can consult the voter's guide for them.
Okay.
Okay.
Glenn,
So
take it away.
Here's a very sobering number. If Missouri wants to have 8 members of Congress after the 2030 census, we need to have a net gain of 100,000 Missourians every year for the rest of this decade. Missouri is been falling behind in growth. Some of us remember when Missouri had 12 members of Congress, we're down to 8. Unless we can get a net gain of 100,000 people per year in this state through 2030, we're going to go down to 7 members of Congress. That's just the way it is. We are losing our clout. We are losing our young people. I know this is being recorded, but I'm still going to say a couple of nice things about Mike Parsons. He actually did try to get more money for teachers and starting pay, and to get more money into capital projects around the state, for the state universities, the state police lab, things like that. He has been thwarted in large part by his own party, and especially by one person who I'm calling the villain of Carthage, Cody Smith, the budget chairman. Smith is I think he must think that any money the state doesn't spend, he gets to take 2 pennies home or something, because they had their budget markup on Thursday. It was remarkable how he is still insisting on the old rule in the Missouri legislature that if you want to add $100 here, you have to take $100 from somewhere else. On top of that, there were a number of proposals for things like economic development, like small grants for entrepreneurs and things like that, which he stomped down with a heavy foot. One big thing I noticed watching the hearing, because you can watch the bigger hearings now, especially in the House, on video on your computer. Almost all the amendments to the budget were done by voice vote. And 2 things. 1, a Democratic amendment almost never had a chance. And 2, the speaker or the chairman heard what the chairman wanted to hear. There were several efforts where amendments appeared to have the voice vote win, and the chair ruled they didn't. So add Cody Smith to your list of enemies in Jefferson City. He has really worked against. Now this year, Missouri, for the first time in decades, not only has money, they have a lot of money. We have pandemic money. General revenue is doing well. There are other sources of money coming into Missouri. This is not the year to tighten the belt. This is year to make up for lost time. And they did want to do some of that on buildings, again, on the college campuses, the new state police laboratory, things like that. But the legislature is standing in the way. There is a possibility that next year we will get one of those dreaded Hancock refunds. Depending on how some things come down, I think some of the legislators want that because the numbers for that would come out right before the general election in November. I really think some of the members, especially in the House, are trying to engineer a situation where they're going to tell us we're all going to get a $200 check in 2023. Remember, $1 billion extra money in general revenue is available this year. They're trying not to spend it. Probably the most frustrated person in that room Thursday when they had their markup was Representative Peter Meredith from South City, who pointed out directly when the chairman said, "Oh, we'll talk about that offline." And Peter said, "I've heard that before," and then nothing ever happened. There is no trust between the members of the legislature anymore on keeping their word or deals being worked out. The idea of compromise is really gone. On top of that, while we're in the House, let's take a look at some of the really bad ideas that are out there. One is Representative Koenen from High Ridge. No Missouri resident could have an abortion anywhere in the country because their friends or neighbors could report them and get them in trouble for going to another state for an abortion. That made the Washington Post. The Guns Everywhere Bill 2022 edition. There will be some sort of gun uncontrol Christmas tree that comes out near the end of the legislative session. There are measures there now in the pipeline, which would first of all lower concealed carry to 18 and take away virtually every restriction on where guns are not allowed. They could be in churches, they could be in banks, they could be in Busch Stadium. And in two of the bills that are being proposed, guns could be in schools. Now, the one sponsor says that he doesn't mean for high school students to be able to carry guns to school. But if you read the language in his bill, it sounds like it does. And some of us turned 18 before we graduated high school. That could make teaching those seniors that last semester a lot more interesting if some of them are packing heat. But it's okay because the teachers can carry too. So we could have some interesting school dynamics there. Also talking about schools, I was surprised to learn the Rockwood and Wentzville school districts had obscene material in their library. And getting this obscene material out was so important that they had to attach an amendment in the Senate to a bill on rights for sexual assault victims. It took an awful lot of pressure to get that bill in the informal counter to get rid of that amendment and then to bring it back. The Assault Victim Bill of Rights was bipartisan. Joe Shoup was involved with drafting it. You had numerous Republican senators. They had a press conference where Republicans and Democrats stood together to talk about this bill. Yet the conservative caucus, the 7 senators led by Bob Onder, wanted to get their bill on getting obscene things out of libraries so bad they're willing even to upset that apple cart. The conservative caucus has 7 members and there are 3 fellow travelers who vote with them sometimes. That's enough. That has put the Senate into total chaos, which may be a good thing. Going back to education, literally there is, as Sam can explain too, there is a war on education in the Missouri legislature. They're talking about restrictions on school boards, moving school board elections to November so they'll be more politicized. They're talking about letting parents have veto power over every bit of curriculum making the school district post all the curriculum online where parents can comment on it. Representative Ian Mackey has talked about the heckler's veto. The one bill would even allow parents to attend school and interrupt the teacher with complaints about what's being taught. On top of that, remember I said, Governor Parson wanted to raise the starting pay for teachers to $38,000 a year, which would still be below many of the states around us. The legislature said, listening to rural districts, they were saying we can't afford that because then we have to give everybody a raise. Well, yes, you have teachers who aren't making hardly any money. The answer to that is a bill now in the hopper, which unfortunately I keep getting told has legs, that would allow districts to hire people who do not have teaching certificates to teach as regular teachers, not as subs. After 4 years of being a teacher, you would get a teaching certificate even if you never stepped foot in a classroom for education courses. That is a very real possibility. There's another concern right now. Word was getting out that at Mizzou and other state colleges, the education department people were telling their students, look at the salaries first of all, because you need to have enough money to pay your student loans and to live, which many of the rural legislators took as saying, don't look at rural Missouri schools. And there's going to be payback on that. There's a lot of unhappiness about that approach. So look for something in there come up late in session to make, let's say, Mizzou and the other state schools can't advise the students who to look for or what to look for when they're doing their job search. Again, back to the Senate. Redistricting died. For all practical purposes, it is dead in the legislature. The House passed a not horrible bill, a 6-2 bill, 6 Republicans, 2 Democrats in January. The Conservative caucus still will not give up on their idea of a 7-1. They did pass a 6-2 bill, a version of map. However, that map is so convoluted, as Ben Samuels was mentioning, it takes the 2nd district all the way down to Ironton. It puts most of St. Charles County in the 3rd district with Blaine Lichtenmeyer, who drives a tractor outside of Jeff City. Also, the map, that both maps created a district across northern Missouri that goes from the Iowa and Nebraska border to the Quiver River in Lincoln County. What that means is one district with almost 50 counties in it, and the distance from Maryville to, I think it was Bowling Green, is the same as the distance from St. Louis to Chicago. You would have a congressional district with over 300 miles from corner to corner. That's because all those counties are losing population. A map going to the courts, which would unfortunately be more vertical, so you don't have a district 300 miles wide, probably is what's going to happen. And again, it's going to go to the courts. We have a chance of getting a 5-3 map out of the courts where we don't have it with the legislature. It's hard to imagine a worse map coming out of the judges than what's been proposed by the Republicans. Even the better House map is not good for Democrats. So that situation is going to be coming up, and it's going to make a difference because you have 9 members of the legislature running for Congress. And however that map turns out, it may not mean that Ben has to go down to Ironton if he's lucky, or Trish Gumby has to go down to Ironton, but there could be some major changes in the way the districts are laid out if it goes to the court, and the court follows the accepted procedures and not this Jerry-man happy, crazy line drawing that the Senate and House both have enjoyed. Normally, appointments by the governor are fairly routine, not with the Conservative caucus. They objected to the governor's choice to head Department of Health and Senior Services. Now, 95% of what they objected to was fiction. He had no track record in Illinois of doing the things they were accusing him of. However, He never denied the fact that he was Jewish. We cannot overlook the fact that a couple days after he was voted down by the Senate, the governor made a speech where he said to the media that Missouri is a state with strong Christian values, indirectly saying, I won't make the mistake of putting up somebody who's Jewish again. That is something the conservative caucus and a lot of Missouri rural legislators, that is a thing. That is something we need to be aware of. It's going to impact appointments. It's impacting appointments now. What's going to happen in the future? Again, we're becoming a very polarized state. We have a governor who's talking about traditional Christian values, whose brother is a Baptist minister. We have to be concerned about that, because if we're trying to attract young people to Missouri, if you look at our gun laws, if you look at our abortion laws, if you look at our lack of investment in education, why would a young couple starting their career look at Missouri? The education support isn't there. Support in other ways isn't there. This is going to be a rough legislative session. I think we have to look at the fact that they may not get a budget passed this year. The budget normally goes over to the Senate before spring break. They had a very lengthy session in the House Budget Committee, like I said, on Thursday, going to almost 9 o'clock, around 9 o'clock at night, marking up the bills, but they still have to go to the floor of the House. There's going to be a lot of debate there and a lot of amendments made there. We're probably looking at the Senate not even getting the budget to around the 19th of April. And yet the final budget has to be agreed upon by both houses and in place by the first Friday in May. I don't think they're going to make it this year. And again, this should be the year when it's easy, because there's enough money not only to fund the state obligations, but to actually move forward. And yet, because of all the infighting, because of the fact that both in the House and the Senate, they're going to use the budget to legislate. For example, banning funding Planned Parenthood, banning funding for certain books in libraries. It could very well be there'll be an amendment that's being talked about for the House Education DESE bill that would say that librarians could only put books into their library after they've been posted for approval, and either the legislature or parents would have the right to object. So in other words, if you're a school librarian, you would buy books in January. You would probably have to order your books in January, then send your order sheet around, but not be able to actually buy the books until later in the year. I don't know about you, but I don't know many high school librarians who are going to be putting obscene books on their shelves or pornographic books. And remember, almost all of the books they decided were obscene or pornographic, the vast majority of them were by African-American authors, and almost all of them were critically acclaimed. But they weren't critically acclaimed by the right people. So this is going to be an interesting session. By next month, we should know what's going on with the budget. Also, by next month, it's possible the conservative caucus will have brought the entire state government to a grinding halt, because they filibuster everything. They put amendments on everything. 7 people with 3 friends, basically stopping the work of 183 others. That's life. Okay. Any questions? Sorry to be so depressing, but this is Missouri.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, Don.
Don?
yeah, Glenn, so what do you think we should do?
For one thing, we have to admit that it's going to be bad for at least 2 more years. We already know that there are more and more Republicans each election cycle who are getting their jobs in Jeff City without even a primary opponent. They paid their filing fee and they're a state rep, and in 2 cases, a state senator. We have to find a way to at least get Democrats running and get issues brought up out in rural Missouri. I know it's hard. I know it's uphill. I know most of these people are going to get beaten, 85-15. But right now, some of the craziest stuff is coming out of people, like the abortion bill that would basically condemn a woman to death if she had a pregnancy in her fallopian tubes. That came from a guy who's never had a candidate run against him from Branson. Until we get out there and we have big debates, open debates, and get the issues brought up, most Missourians do not know who their state rep is. Even in August and November, when they vote for them, I bet you 5 minutes out of the polling place, they won't remember who they voted for. And we have to change that. I also think the best long-term solution is, I've told you before, is fewer state reps. We have 163. We could get by very well with 104 and have 3 state rep districts within 1 Senate district. Be much more logical system, and you wouldn't have people in offices in the Capitol that don't have windows. They literally have one Republican they're mad at who is now in what was a janitor's closet in the Capitol. So that's the woman who was selling the phony COVID cure. Next. Steve?
Steve?
Yeah, I guess I don't understand why. I think it was something like 56 districts or something where no Democrat is running. And I just don't understand why the party doesn't get somebody run, regardless of their chances of winning. You know, you have to start somewhere. So I simply don't understand that, why that happens.
I think part of it is the fact that a lot of these rural districts, you become a pariah if you become known as a Democrat. Now, I ran in the 95th in 2016, and I had people running into my grocery cart 2 years later at yearbooks because I was a Democrat. Yeah, I was a baby killing, gun grabbing socialist.
I know that the state party is trying to develop Democrats to run, you know, to identify Democrats to run in rural areas, but it's an uphill battle. It's just gotten harder and harder.
And one of our sources of candidates outstate used to be the teachers' unions. Now they seem to be so afraid of making the Republicans unhappy, most of them do not endorse candidates anymore.
The other thing, Glenn, is, so what happens if a budget is not passed?
That's a good question. Based on prior years and based on the state constitution, the governor would have no option except to call a special session because he cannot start the year July 1st without spending authority. State budget year starts July 1st, fiscal year. He would have to call a special session, even if it took from midnight on June 1st to 11:59 on June 30th. He's got to have a budget.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Glenn.
Sam, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. You know, about the issue of having people kind of like-minded, I suppose, in rural areas. You know, my aunt in Texas County, to run for a school board position, she had to run as a Republican for that reason that Glenn was mentioning. I'm sorry if I hope I got your name correct. Because she could not, there was no feasible way for her to get any sort of traction if she ran as a Democrat. So, like, I know that Machiavelli is not quite the favored name, but, you know, just go with it. But run them as Republicans, and then, you know, as long as they're not this crazy Republican brand, what does it matter? As long as they're not voting like they are now, at least you can have a common conversation with them.
To show you how bad things are outstate, in St. Genevieve County, there's always a Democratic county. Gephardt used to get a great majority down there. 4 of their existing office holders, including the sheriff, have switched from the Democratic to the Republican Party because it's the only way they can survive.
Yeah. My grandfather used to vote. Who was the guy out by, he was forever a Democrat out by Jackson County, like a little west of Jackson County. And now Vicky Hartzler has his old seat.
Jeff
What's that
Ferraro
guy's
is
name?
running in Jefferson County as a Republican. Last time he ran as a Democrat. You know, he's
Because they
going.
just cannot make it.
I wanted to suggest that there is another strategy. You know, if things, given how crazy things have gotten in Jefferson City, and that is for the city of St. Louis and St. Louis County to secede from the state of Missouri.
Agreed. Here, here. Because Illinois has to be a better place.
How about Kansas City too?
No, those people are crazy over there.
That's for them to decide, but we would have 1.3 million people. And we would have, I guess, maybe 2 congressmen.
Yes.
And the state would go broke.
Yeah,
Yes.
let them. So I think
Deanna had her hand up earlier.
you know I'm all for MOPAG advocate. You know, spearheading a campaign to secede from the state of Missouri.
Though that doesn't set quite the great precedent, does it?
So Glenn, I'm wondering about, would you talk just a little bit more? Actually, there are two questions I might have, but one is the Victims Bill of Rights. What is that? Have a bill number? And can you just say, I'm sorry, I'm trying to write down things, but I didn't get enough about that. But I'd like to report on that. So can you say a little more about that?
The Victim Bill of Rights is still alive. It did finally get out of the Senate, but as a combined bill, I don't have that number with me. But if you look at Joe Shoup's profile on the Senate website, you'll see that she was the co-sponsor. It's like 3 or 4 bills amalgamated together now, but it's got the most important things. And there's a House version that also has gotten passed. They're gonna have to reconcile it. That one, I think, because of all the bad press the conservative caucus got in trying to put the protecting kids by getting obscene materials out of libraries, the pushback they got on that, I think that one will get across the finish line. And by the way, the items in that bill, I don't know why anybody would even, why it was not a consent bill. They're talking about things like basically having a right to have your evidence examined by a rape kit professionally, the right to a shower and a change of clothes after a hospital visit, and certain other very basic things that should not have even been debatable. They're just common sense and common decency.
Okay, and then the other thing is, you know, being still a relatively newcomer, having come from California, is there any way that our messaging, that we are not messaging, that could be better? I know broadband could help us, perhaps, but to get to people's hearts and minds, I mean, how are they just so controlled by one party point of view?
When they were talking about the radio stations, if you go to outstate Missouri, there is no longer a fairness doctrine. If you listen to Missouri Net, which is the news service that comes out of Jeff City, for years Phil Brooks was their main reporter. Very seldom do anything the Democrats do get anything other than a one-line mention. Remember, Crystal Quaid and Senator Rizzo generally have press availabilities at the end of each week. And even the Post-Dispatch generally does not cover them anymore. They do not want to listen to us because we are super minorities in the House and the Senate. We don't, and Nicole Galloway is our only statewide elected person. And the thing is, if you listen to the radio, we have now 4 right-wing talk radio stations in St. Louis. We have KMOX and whatever McGraw-Belhaven is on now. I keep forgetting their call letters, but those two have moved further from being centrist to being more on the right. There really is no outlet for anything other than conservative talk. You have St. Louis on the air for an hour a day on NPR, and that's pretty much the only place a Democrat or progressive is going to get any airplay whatsoever. Remember, on KMOX, when she was there, they considered Jane Duker to be their House liberal. That's what we're doing. Yes, Don.
So is there any,
One of the reasons why I was hoping that we would find someone to buy those Illinois radio stations that I forget his name, the Grim Reaper was forced to give up.
Right, the FCC took them away.
Yes, Ron, whatever his name was. That would have been a nice thing to have.
So, I mean, here we are, the Missouri Progressive Action Group, okay? We're being out hustled, we're being outmaneuvered by the grifters, okay? And, it's easy to say, hard to do. And actually there's, this is an international debate too, autocracy versus democracy. And, as progressives, we've got to figure out a better way to reach out. And I think Deanna was talking about this. How do we reach out and bridge these gaps between urban and rural so that we are focused on common goals. And at the end of the day, we probably do agree on 80% of the issues. The problem is we've got these demagogues, these hustlers. The Conservative Caucus is a great example of that, who've cultivated this system that preys on people's fears and then provides them with the power to keep the grift rolling. And we have to figure out creatively how to break that chain.
I wish I knew, but again, you go outstate and listen to their radio, read their newspapers. It's very, very obvious that they've all drank the Kool-Aid. The city is a dangerous place where nobody comes out alive. That's why we need guns. You look at what's going on right now. We've had that horrible rash of children being shot. That does not move the needle in Jeff City at all.
Yeah, but they have their problems too. Okay, yeah. And they're accepting they've normalized the maternal mortality rates, the drug addiction, the suicides. They all have these problems too.
Right. But look at their answers. They can't attract teachers who are certified because their pay is so low. So their answer is to stop using certified teachers.
Not only that, but they're going to 4-day weeks. Actually, 128 school districts in Missouri, 1/4 of our school districts are now on 4-day weeks. They can't afford to keep their schools open 5 days a week. That they save money by not heating the buildings an extra day and not paying for the lights an extra day. Any dime they can save, they're saving. They are, screwing themselves so badly. And we are, as Democrats, are not coming back and saying, look at this. Why are you doing this to yourself? I think if we had populist candidates that talk to people like that, we might be able to make some headway.
How about just a weird idea? May I break it? I'm sorry to break in, but have we ever done, have we ever hired like a really super powerful PR company?
The state party, last I heard, there was a rumor the state party wasn't paying our state chairman mileage. That's how poor our party is.
Well, what if we created a fundraiser or something?
Michael Butler is trying to do that. First of all, our state party chair is Michael Butler. He's going to the National Democratic Party to get money, and he is looking to try and raise money any which way he can for the state party. Michael is a young man, and he's pretty smart, and he is working as hard as he can to try and identify candidates to run outstate. But it is
very difficult,
a very tough row to hoe.
One thing you have to remember, that the cost of a district-wide mailer at the state rep level in Missouri is now about $6,000 if you use union labor on the printing, because the postal rates have gone up. Because the postal service has gone down, you can't risk anymore doing a mailing that's going to arrive the last 2 or 3 days before an election. I'd be afraid to send a mailing out less than 2.5 weeks before an election now with the mail service. So you pay more and get less service. And the one problem we have is our Democratic candidates are fighting a lot of misinformation about them that's being whispered from person to person, said from church pulpits, or said by the Republican parties in ads where you don't have the money to respond. I found out in 2016 that I was for the city-county merger. I hadn't taken a position up. I found out the other side had sweatshirts.
They have the, the Republicans have the money. They do this cascade avalanche of direct mail in the last 2 weeks that lies about every candidate out there, and they get away with it. So yeah, we have to figure out a way to bring
Do
a
we
better fight.
do we have on a
It's,
state level?
some of them aren't. And
Pardon
some
me?
of them aren't disciplined. Like, they aren't, like with the example of St. Louis, Rasheen Aldridge hasn't been disciplined with the party. Before him, what's her name? Nasheed wasn't disciplined with. Jamila Nasheed wasn't disciplined with the party. Made us lose that vote to lose the other the House vote with the U.S. House Representatives. So it makes it easier for the Republicans to send out that misinformation on people if that small caucus is not in lockstep. Sorry, thank you. Didn't mean to cut it. I didn't mean to.
No,
That's all right.
Sam, thank you for those remarks. Because I personally have been working to try and find somebody to primary Rasheen, and it's a personal I'm deeply disappointed that we couldn't find anybody to file to run against him. We need to get rid of him.
Maybe we could find, is there a committee? I'm sure there is at the state level for communications and PR, except for the president. Is there a group actively working on those particular issues?
Well, in
They do
Missouri,
have-
like I said, our minority leader and the Senate, minority leader, they have a press conference, a press availability almost every Thursday, and try to find coverage of it. Unless you're watching it live stream on Facebook, you're not going to see it because it's not picked up by the media. Democrats aren't news unless we shoot somebody.
And is there any lawsuit we can lodge against that?
Not with the fairness doctrine going.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at some of the papers in the rural areas, they've got their Republican senator or representative filing a recurrent report that tells people exactly what's going on according to the Republican viewpoint.
Yes.
And that's what they see.
Remember, as Ben pointed out, 70% of registered Republicans believe the 2020 election was stolen. Now, how they can believe that we stole the presidency without stealing all the ones underneath too, we're very inefficient. If we did steal it, you would think we would have taken the whole board.
Ann Wagner was sharp enough to, or her handlers were smart enough to make sure that she didn't vote against the certification of Biden, like about 147, something like that, Republicans who voted against Biden's certification.
147.
Well, I'm willing to help if I can in any way work on these, maybe like finding pro bono people for campaigns to help people with their campaigns, communications. I don't know. I'm willing to try to help if anyone else wants to try to do that. Or
The big thing is we somehow need to create a pot of money so that in rural areas, people have a fighting chance.
Yeah.
They're gonna need, say, $20,000 to get a couple of mailers out. They're gonna need to be able to hire professionals for things like polling to find out what the issues are in their districts. And that takes money. And right now our party doesn't have it.
Well, I don't know. We've got this Trudy Bush Valentine person running for Senate. She's got money. Maybe we can get her to actually share some of her resources with the state party. Anybody want to try and lean on her?
I don't know her.
Oh, but she may actually, you
Who's
know,
her?
to get people to work for, you know, the congressional person will get those people, Democrats, out to vote. And, you know, so anything. And they have done that in the past. The upper echelon people who have some money have dispersed, not enough, but they have dispersed it. But I've been twice in the last number of years on committees who have gotten together to search for candidates around the state, especially in the places where there is no Democratic candidate, and it has not produced tremendous success. So, but yeah, having Trish's money might do the job.
Thank you all. I hope to someday come in with better news. Like I said, we have to give Parson credit. He did try to get a raise for teachers. He did try to get some capital projects done. And he did try to get a small raise for state employees. So
yeah, the thing that gets me is that he declared the end of the pandemic, and I thought he never thought there was one.
Glenn, we need your sobering slap in the face on a regular basis. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, very much.
Well, it's been a good conversation this afternoon, and I'm glad we took the time to have it. Is there anything anyone else wants to bring up before we close? Going once, going twice. I'd like to remind everyone that our next meeting